Fantastic. Here we are. I'm delighted to have you on board. Claire Morel from the European Commission. Graça Raposo from, oh, here you are, from CNRS and Institut Curie. Karen Stroobants, here you are, from MCAA, and Thomas Bonnard from MCAA as well. We're going to start with you, Claire Morel. You are the head of unit of the MSCA at the European Commission, and we would like to hear you talk about the strategic directions from a policy perspective. And also we will be able to ask you questions at the end of this session. So think of them, and you over the internet, you can also type your questions in the chat section. Claire Morel, would you like to start? You can either stay here or go to the lectern, just as you wish. Just as you wish. This?
Well, good morning, and thank you very much for inviting me to this session, or this panel discussion on the future priorities of the Marie-Sklodowska Curie action. As you now heard, I mean, MSCA, in short, is the program for the researchers' mobility, the training and the career development of researchers. And last year, it celebrated its 25th anniversary. You've heard as well that since then, almost 150,000 researchers at all stages of their career have been funded through the program. And when the program was launched in 1986 by the then Commissioner Edith Cresson, in the first year, 800 researchers were funded through the program. The next year, 1,000 researchers. And now, every year, we fund the mobility, the career development of about 10,000 researchers. And it goes from short-term stays up to the whole duration of a doctoral program. The program, as you will understand, has grown into a simple mobility program, into a much more ambitious program. And I'd like to highlight a few important dimensions of this program, which goes well beyond the mobility program. There was a midterm evaluation of the Horizon 2020 program, which highlighted the many strengths of the Marie-Sklodowska Curie action. So you've heard its role in contributing to strengthening the attractiveness of Europe in the global race for talents. The emphasis on cross-sectoral collaboration, interdisciplinarity, and the role as well of the program, and you will hear more about it this afternoon, in raising the importance of science amongst the general public. The program has an important contribution, not only in terms of mobility. Of course, mobility is important, but in terms of boosting researchers' career. And the impact of the program is not only on individual researchers, but also on institutions. So institutions participating in the program see really a strong impact in terms of attractiveness, in terms of international visibility, both of the organizations involved, but also of the wider innovation ecosystem. The MSCA also contributes to the ambitions of the European Commission and the EU to revitalize the European research area, which is the single market for research and innovation, where researchers are able to freely move amongst all its members. But in my view, one of the most important, let's say, contribution of the program has been the almost compulsory element of the MSCA, which has been the almost compulsory application of the European Charter for Researcher and the Code of Conduct for the recruitment of researchers, which have introduced good practices in researchers' career well beyond the project themselves. So really the impact of these of the good practices introduced through the European Charter and the Code of Conduct for the recruitment of researchers, have had a huge impact. In fact, in some countries, they have even been introduced in the legal framework of those countries. I will just mention a few of these aspects of the Code of Conduct and the Charter. So it's recognizing the value of all forms of mobility as a means to enhance the professional development of researchers. It's taking into account the fact that researchers have multiple roles. They are researchers, but they are also communicators. They are project communicators. They are mentors. It has also introduced ethical principles, research freedom, public engagement, continuous professional development, attractive working conditions, the access to networking and training opportunities. All these things have been are now part of, let's say, of a regular research practices, and they were, I mean, it's really thanks to the MSCA that these principles were introduced largely in institutions across Europe and beyond. Another important, I think, element of the success of the MSCA is the fact that I mentioned that it's, I mean, it's been mentioned several times that it's a bottom-up program, which means that it can contribute to any EU priorities, and it complements very well the other parts of Horizon Europe and Horizon 2020 program in the past, which are a much more top-down character. And it means that the MSCA can contribute to any EU priorities. And we have started to highlight this, the fact that they can contribute to any priorities by organizing cluster events where our researchers meet with policymakers to discuss or to show let's say, the impact of their research on EU priorities, such as the EU research and innovation mission. So we've started to organize these cluster events around the EU missions, and very soon there will be one on oceans. Another important as well contribution of the MSCA has been and continues to be the cooperation with the non-academic world. This has been mentioned as well several times this morning. And in the current phase of the program, we have introduced even financial incentive to make sure that, that the researchers are more and more, let's say, put in contact with the non-academic world, because we believe that it helps really scientists to innovate and to put their ideas or to turn their knowledge and ideas into products and services to the benefits of society as a whole. We also think that this sectoral cooperation is important for institutions because it helps develop long-term cooperation, partnership cooperation between universities, research centers, and the non-academic world. In the past 7 years under Horizon Europe, we've managed to involve about 5,000 enterprises in the program, and half of them were SMEs. And we really hope that this will continue to expand in the future. Another important dimension of the MSCA is its international dimension. There were recently two important communications, so policy communication from the Commission, one on the global approach to research and innovation, and the other one was the strategy for European universities. They were recently published, and both communications share the same vision that higher education, research and innovation are key factors in the Europe global influence, and that they are putting the EU values and EU principle should be at the core of this international cooperation. So when I speak of EU values and EU principles, I'm thinking in particular, of course, of academic freedom, research ethics, open science, equality, gender equality, but also openness and multilateralism to deliver joint solutions. And these dimensions were really highlighted in these two communications. In fact, MSCA is already the most international component of Horizon 2020, and we hope it will continue to be the same under Horizon Europe. Today, about 40% of our researchers are from outside the EU, and the program has accounted for more than half of all international participation in Horizon 2020. We also rely on a large network of alumni. We have 2 with us now, and there are about 20,000 currently alumni all over the world in about 150 different nationalities. They are the true ambassadors of the program. And they are not only ambassadors of the program, but I think also that they are ambassadors of European values, and they are important relays all over the world for the development of scientific diplomacy. So MSCA promotes academic freedom. We offer support to persecuted researchers, and you've heard that we are just about to launch a new fellowship scheme for Ukrainian researchers displaced in Europe. So it shows really the direct contribution that the program brings to academic freedom. We are also launching a new action under MSCA, the MSCA Advocacy Project, to reinforce our international presence, for instance, by organizing targeted promotion events to attract specific players in different places of the world, to identify as well weaknesses and opportunities of our international dimension, and also to improve the framework conditions of this cooperation, because with many regions of the world, let's say the mobility flows are not really balanced. So we need to discuss with a number of countries and regions to see how to make these mobility flows more based on reciprocity. This afternoon, there will be a specific session dedicated to the Green Charter, to the sustainable impact of the program. So I'm not going to say too much about it, but this is now an important priority as well, to be sure that the program contributes to sustainable research by reducing the environmental impact of the MSCA project, by increasing the awareness of environmental issues, and we've heard this morning a very inspiring presentation on how we could make this probably more efficient, especially when it comes to sustainable behaviors. Finally, I think one of our, let's say important priorities, and the last one I wanted to mention, is what we call widening. Widening means to emphasize the inclusiveness dimension of the MSCA, because we know that not all countries and regions in Europe are performing equally in attracting and retaining talented researchers. So under MSCA, although it's a program which is based on excellence, it's a program which is bottom-up, we promote a more balanced brain circulation. We've just carried out a study on mobility flows of MSCA, which shows very clearly that the program is effective not only at attracting talent within Europe and from outside Europe, but also at retaining your talent in Europe, especially those talents who come from outside Europe, or those European researchers who were based outside Europe and which, thanks to the MSCA project, remain in Europe after their experience with MSCA. And this study also shows that the program promotes returning researchers, especially to what we call the widening countries, so those countries that are not performing so well in terms of attracting and retaining talent. When researchers, I mean, the MSCA helps really researchers from the diaspora to go back to their countries and stay there. One actions which we have introduced a few years ago to facilitate this returning phase of researchers to widening countries are the widening fellowships, which are now called the ERA fellowships, which allows researchers from those countries to do their research in what we call a widening country. So we play a role, of course, in supporting this return mobility, but we should not forget, obviously, that MSCA can only play a small role, and that when it comes to let's say, attracting talent, of course, the member states have an important role to play, ensuring that the investment in R&I remains a top priority, because what attracts researchers is the opportunity to work with leading scientists. It's also the quality of the research infrastructure and the training and networking opportunities which are offered. So here the member states have to play an important role. MSCA cannot do everything on its own. So that's all what I wanted to mention in terms of past and future priorities. We will look now at the measures which we have introduced in the framework of the current phase of the program to see if they have been efficient. As I said, for example, we've introduced some measures to reinforce intersectoral cooperation. And if we see that they have not been, let's say, efficient enough, we will need to reflect on other types of measures. And I hope really that the recommendations that will be made today at today's conference will help us to improve the program and make it even more efficient and relevant to the life of European and international researchers. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you very much, Claire Morel. It was very important to have you on board as you work at the European Commission as the head of unit of the MSCA program. We can see that you already do a lot to develop the MSCA program and to make it evolve and meet new challenges, though I'm sure that there's still room for improvements which we can think of. Let's move on to Graça Raposo. Graça Raposo, you're a research director at CNRS. You can go wherever you want. At the lectern, it will be fantastic. Yes. You are a research director at CNRS, a team leader in the Department of Cell Biology and Cancer. Your lab is here at the Institut Curie, and you are also a director for advanced training at Institut Curie, so you coordinate all training actions, including the PhD program. So we are going to hear you talk about the strategic directions from an academic perspective, and also you're going to tell us about these two COFUND programs that you've been able to obtain and which allow you to recruit more PhD students. Graça Raposo.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. I'm really happy to be here, and it's a real honor, a real pleasure to be presenting the two COFUND programs that we succeed to obtain from these PhD COFUNDs. Though, I mean, I do have the chance to be a CNRS researcher in a CNRS department that is here at Institut Curie, and as Paul said, my lab is in the 6th floor over here, but I'm also director for the advanced training. And so just before presenting the two COFUND programs, I would just like to see how we were really, what was the enthusiasm to apply for these COFUND programs, I mean, also in the context of our institute. So, I mean, you already had a really nice story, I mean, about Marie Curie. Though, I mean, working in this institute is true that, I mean, we always have to remember them, and there's Marie Curie and Claudius Rigaud. And there's really this general development project of the Institut du Radium to really have research and therapeutic applications that are closely linked. And I do think, and this research care continuum is still present over here, and we have medical scientific programs. And, but we do have 3 missions, and there is care, research, and training. And this is really, really important in this house. So the Institut Curie today, I mean, just to show you, I mean, it's spread. So we have Institut Curie in Paris, Institut Curie at Orsay, and Institut Curie at Saint-Cloud. I'm not going really to enter into details. So there are a number of research units. There are 9 in Paris, 4 in Orsay, and there will be also in the future, I think, in Saint-Cloud. But it's also very important things in Saint-Cloud because there is precision medicine, clinical research hub, data center, bioinformatics, and another hospital. So just in numbers, in these 3 research sites, and I won't be talking about the hospital, because it's almost the double. So here at the research center, so we do have, master students, PhD students, postdocs. As you see, there are 64 nationalities, and there are 22 young principal investigators that have been hired now over the years, and this is very important to really stimulate research and newcomers, and they are also, not only French, but they are from many countries around the world. So what about the PhD? Because I'll be talking about the PhDs. So at Time T, we do have now almost 300 PhDs. So these PhDs are funded by the universities. They are funded by funding agencies. But since 2016, a number of them are funded by the European Union. And basically, we did have a PhD program at Institut Curie that started in 2007, but with only few PhDs that were paid by funds from Institut Curie. So for us, it was really important to get a leverage for this international PhD program. And so when the COFUND PhDs were launched in 2014, of course, for us, it was a great, great opportunity to apply for a COFUND PhD. So indeed, in 2000, we got the great news. It was in February 2015. I do remember when I did receive an email from the European Union. I was kind of, these were the first COFUND PhDs, and it was really a real joy, I have to say. So basically, we had this first program that was called IC3Is for Institut Curie, and the 3I stands for international, interdisciplinary, and intersectorial. And so we did introduce this intersectorial part that Claire talked about. And so IC3I, it's now finished this year, so 2022. So we have now 35 fellows from this program. And we were able to do 3 calls. So, but while IC3I was running, we were already thinking, we do have to try to apply for another project. So we did apply for another project. I have to say that the first year we were not successful, but we were in the waiting list. We said, okay, let's retry it. Let's do some study why we were not so successful. And then we had the joy to get the second COFUND program, and this is called Eureka, and Eureka stands for Europe Research Camp. And we are still, this year, now we did just the 3rd call, and we'll be able to do a 4th call still next year. So just in numbers, as you see, we're just plotted in 2015, you see our PhD program that was already international. We had around 5 fellows only. But then, with the IC3I, it was a real leverage, to increase the number of international students at Institut Curie. And now with Eureka, even more, and we'll have still another call next year. So we really increased the number of recruited PhDs. But not only increasing the number of recruited PhDs, because as you see, we have many other PhDs that are funded by with other funds, and they are also all enrolled into this PhD program. So it was a really impact for our institute. I think for our institute, but I do think also at the level of other institutions, and we work together with other institutions, and I'm looking to Rémi, because Rémi Carminati was very successful in getting also a COFUND program, and that was also, I think, really important for the ESPCI, another institution from PSL. So we had an excellent level of PhD recruits. These, we must say, we're really lucky, and we had really a lot of applications. We now have a really worldwide visibility, and we got candidates in all these calls from around 60 different countries. We can then discuss about what are really the countries that are applying, but they are from all over the world. And we do think that it was really important for our institution then to get this Human Resources of Excellence, the European label, because what we implemented for the PhD program then was really also helping us to change our mode of recruitment, getting these transparent mode of recruitments that not only for the PhDs for this program, but for PhDs and also for postdocs. So what are, I mean, our recommendations based on the first COFUND with these international, intersectorial, interdisciplinary, and I must say that some colleagues were a little bit afraid of these intersectorial, what is really intersectorial? Yes, I mean, we really had, we had great ties with industry, and the industrials, I mean, were really happy also to partner with us, to mentor and to give secondments to our students. And some of them are now even having startups or starting in the industry. And what are really the strengths? I mean, I think this personalized career development plan that we implemented have been really important, and the students are very happy with it. Of course, there is this welcome day upon arrival. We implemented doctoral missions that help them doing other things, and among them, I mean, we heard history of Marie Curie. One of our fellows worked tightly with the director of Institut Curie at the Curie Museum. This was his doctoral mission, and he was really happy to do that. Others worked on communication or worked at the tech transfer office or work on organizing international courses. And I think it was also important to get then training on quality supervision for PIs. Based, I mean, now on the Eureka strengths, and the Eureka is still running, I mean, we implemented an induction period, and I think this was really important, and the students are very happy, so they come 1 month before, and during 1 month, they get some training, they get to to know other laboratories, they are really in a group, and they can interact with via our Association for Docs and Postdocs, and they really create a community, and it's a period that is really important. So they have this integrated training path, so career guidance, secondments, mentoring. I mean, they have these thesis committees that are, of course, for whole PhDs, but here for those, it's really important. We got really a good focus on research integrity, gender balance, that we'll talk this afternoon, open science, health democracy, and this strong translational approach. So at Eureka, really a lot of projects are between the hospital and the research center, and we realized that with the IC3I, because we had a lot of candidates applying for projects that were between the hospital and the research center, and we introduced that in the Eureka, and really linking this basic in clinical research with the industrial sector, and really this sound dissemination strategy, so website, job fairs, social media. So I think, I mean, this is what we learned. I mean, thank you for your attention. I mean, the talks were quite short. I mean, I could give you more inputs on that. But I really think, and I do have, I think that, okay, we can say, okay, it's a success. But I don't want to say it's a success. I think we learned a lot, and I think we can make even a greater success in the future, by trying to launch other programs, and maybe also in partnering with our other institutions with complementary expertises. And I think that in the future, I think we really need to work on that, and we all learn much from that. So thanks a lot.
Thanks very much, Graça Raposo, for this talk. Now we're going to move on to Karen Stroobants. So Karen, you were a chemist and at first, and you moved into policy advice You had a Marie Curie grant in chemistry starting in 2016 as a chemist, as I just said. And now you're a policy advisor and consultant on research policy, and you're based in Cambridge. And you're also a member of the Marie Curie Alumni Association. You're a member of the policy working group there. So it's going to be interesting to hear you about your personal experience as an individual fellow, and also to hear about the work that you do on research assessment. Sure, go ahead. While you get there, can we have a big round of applause for Karin Stroobants, please?
I'll also start just with saying thanks for the invite. So I was asked to talk partly about my personal experience as an individual fellow, which is now a few years behind me, but which I can say has very much shaped my career. And then also I'll talk a bit about some of my hopes for the future, because I think the next generation is part of what we're trying to talk about today. So as Paul already introduced, if I can, yeah. I received my MSCA fellowship in 2016. I'm originally from Belgium, but I then moved to the University of Cambridge, where I did my own fellowship. And I'm actually still there. So it's a very, very nice city. So I found my partner there, and I've stayed there. It's been an extremely amazing experience to work in the chemistry department in Cambridge. But the aspect of my individual fellowship that I want to emphasize, also just to set the context a bit for what I want to talk about next, is the opportunities that it has given me to really develop my career. So at the bottom, I've presented a few of the events where I really was mostly focused on talking about the research that I was doing. So actually the one bottom right is actually is that bottom right for you as well? Yes, it is. That's actually at one of the Marie Curie Alumni Association conferences where I was interacting with others on the research I was doing. And the one in the middle bottom is one of the highlights, I would say, of my scientific career, where I was speaking at the Linda Nobel Laureates meetings, where I got actually congratulated for my research results by John Walker, a Nobel laureate, who said, "I've read your paper and I've been very impressed." And it's actually soon after that I started to look for jobs outside academia, feeling that I had achieved some kind of highlight, I think. But at the top, I'm also presenting, these are all also events that I attended during my time as a fellow, and they are all related to the science policy space. So it is really during my fellowship that I started to explore, you know, what else is there and where can I apply my skills, because I felt there were a lot of transferable skills that I was developing that were also very valuable. And so it includes one event in the European Parliament where I had the privilege to shadow an MEP. It includes the Euroscience Open Forum, which has been really instrumental in giving me an idea of what science policy is. And also an event in Cambridge where there is actually a whole network of postdocs and PhD students really focusing on the exchange between science and policy. So these interactions and this independence I had during my fellowship has really been able to not just give me the scientific experience, but also has been very much shaping me in understanding the science policy landscape and the opportunities in that direction. And switching to some of my thoughts on the future, I want to talk a bit about broadening definitions of success and excellence in science. And so after my individual fellowship finished, I actually continued in a career as a policy advisor, starting in the Royal Society in London. And then since then, I've also held roles at the Royal Society of Chemistry, where I'm now employed part-time, and also at the consultancy RAND Europe, where I was for some time a research leader on research on research. And so I want to go back to the roots of that, the policy career. So the first opportunity I had to work on research policy was at the Royal Society, and I was very privileged to work on a project very close to my heart, because I was already as a scientist very interested in the culture of research And with culture, in the sense of what we were working on, is meant the behaviors, the values, the attitudes of researchers in their environment. And in the UK, there were a few reports at the time that were indicating there are some issues around integrity, around diversity and inclusion, around career development. And so different organizations, including at the time the Royal Society, were looking at what are some of the factors that are driving some of these issues to identify where we can look for solutions. And so the culmination of this program I was involved in at the time, or the conclusion, was that it are really this combination of a very highly competitive environment with very narrow definitions of success at the moment that are resulting in poor research culture, and that this has negative effects on the quality of research, but also the environment that researchers are in, and thus the attractiveness of careers. And so since then, I have really shifted my focus to research policy, and specifically to thinking about how we can improve the culture of research, and as part of that, how we can broaden those definitions of success. Of course, there's the second element of competition, where it's really a funding question. I think if we fund more researchers, that will drive down competition. But the other element is really around how can we broaden the definitions of what success means in research and in science. And so I want to talk about, partly about what my vision is for the future, and what I hope to achieve with some of the work that I'm doing now, partly for Royal Society of Chemistry, because I'm working a bit on research culture there as well, but I'm also part-time working as a consultant, focusing on a number of projects really focused on research assessment. And so what I hope is in the future is that research assessment can really, in the first instance, support quality. We know at the moment that there is this so-called publish or perish culture that is driving some negative effects on research and on research quality itself. So my hope is that we can alleviate some of that with thinking about how we can do things differently. I also hope that we will achieve a situation where what is best for research and for research quality is also best for the progression of research careers. Because there's very elegant research done by Noémie Aubert-Bonne that shows that at the moment researchers are really in a position of dilemma. She asked, for example, researchers around the satisfaction they got from contributing more time on, for example, open science, whether they think that that is important for science, and whether they think that that's important for their career, which has shown that if they know that something is important for science but not important for their career, they don't get that much satisfaction. So we are putting researchers in an unfair position at the moment, and what we can do to improve that situation is to ensure that what is best for research is also best for the progression of researchers' career. Then also, I hope we can really recognize all the contributions and the roles that are contributing to research and to research quality, but also to research impact. And we've already heard both from Graça and from Claire about all the other things that researchers do also as part of their fellowships. So it would be good if we can generally, not just within MSCA, but across the system, can really recognize better those contributions. And then finally, I hope that we will look at other things than publications and publication metrics. Without, of course, we need to recognize those have a role within assessment, but we should make sure that there's a range of things that we look at. I'm not the only one who's having a vision of where we can improve on research assessment. And so there's already a lot that happened. So I think it's already 10 years ago that the Declaration on Research Assessment was published, and the Leiden Manifesto short after. So these are initiatives around reforming research assessment. And so I'm now involved in the development of an agreement on reforming research assessment with really a lot of organizations in Europe, and facilitated by the European Commission, by DG RTD. And the whole idea of that is to think about common principles and a shared direction of travel for a reform of assessment, while of course respecting the autonomy of organizations and allowing for different approaches, but really building around facilitation of mutual learning across all those in the ecosystem, to also avoid contradictions and ensure we don't put any barriers to the mobility of researchers. So finally, I was asked, and I think we've all been asked, to think a bit about recommendations for the future for MSCA, and I'm looking at this from the perspective of research culture and research assessment. And I think there are a few considerations, almost already thinking about the next steps beyond even the agreement that I'm working on right now. So the first one, and it's something that's been mentioned already a few times, is how do we encourage better intersectoral mobility? And it's a difficult problem, and we're really not there yet with how we do that. I think we're getting better at the direction from academia to other sectors. We're definitely improving there, but not quite so much in allowing the opposite direction of people from other sectors to move back into academia. So for me, there's an important role of the assessment system in thinking about intersectoral mobility. When I looked at the plans of the Commission that I'm helping now on the agreements, there was actually an objective around intersectoral mobility initially there. And I said to them, I don't think there's much in here that will help with that. So it's not, I don't think it's an objective at the moment, or it's not something we think is in scope of what we're doing currently. But I do believe that it will be important in the future to talk to other sectors about recruitment processes, about the language that is used in recruitment. For me, the main barrier to transition to another field, to policy, it was not having the right skills. It was not knowing how to talk about those skills. If I would have interacted earlier with people who work in the field I work in now, I would have saved a lot of time, not just in finding my first position, but I would probably have entered at a higher level in terms of career progression. So I think actually the MSCA is very well placed with already this intersectoral dimension to contribute to some of the discussions on how assessment approaches can facilitate some of that intersectoral mobility. The second, I think, question that will come up in the future is around the frequency of evaluation. Researchers are evaluated really a lot. If you compare with the return that they get for the number of times that they are evaluated, there are questions around that. And at the moment, part of the kind of focus of reforming research assessment is on how can we do more qualitative assessment. But that is more intense than some of the metrics that are used. So I think we need to, alongside that conversation, think about the frequency of evaluation. And I think with MSCA Seal of Excellence, there's already a move to think about, okay, how can we use this form of evaluation to support or to not duplicate too much? So I think that is something, again, to maybe think how that can be applied also in national systems, or to share knowledge on the use of that Seal of Excellence, and maybe think about whether there's even other ways to contribute to this conversation on evaluation frequency. And then the thing I want to finish with is, for me, a lot of the discussion today around assessment is still about how do we assess research. The main output is seen as the research that comes out. For me, there is another element that is as important as the research, and that is the researchers. At the moment, most researchers, most PhDs and postdocs will actually not continue in academia. There's a question about funding, and I think we should fund more researchers. But that aside, we need to also make sure that we are really thinking about how we're shaping people, and whether the environments that they're in are supportive. And we've heard from Graça all the things that the MSCA program is already doing to help with those transformations, also in HR. So I think there's definitely also a role for the MSCA to share that broader than just the programs they're involved in and the institutions that they're directly linking to. And the coalition that will come together on research assessment reform will be a coalition of mutual learning. And we're hoping to not just get those involved who want to learn, but also those who have things to show, good practice to talk about, to really distribute that also through this coalition. So I think that is also something where MSCA can play a really important role in thinking about how we best support researchers, because their experience in research will shape them partly in the professionals that they will become, in all kind of strands and sectors in society. So I think it's been already shown a few times, the quote from Marie Curie saying, "You cannot hope to build a better world without improving the individuals." And I'll end with that, because I think, for me, that's been the value of MSCAs. I feel I've become a better person through the program, and I hope it can continue on that line to also inspire other organizations. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Karin Stroobants, for highlighting this research assessment issue. And we will move on to Thomas Bonnard. Thomas, you are a material engineer who moved to medical research, and you will tell us about this experience in a moment. We also need to know that you are the chair of the MCAA French Chapter, and you will be talking to us about how to use the MSCA experience into industry. Thomas Bonnard.
Thank you very much.
A big round of applause
Paul, for the... Yes, thank you very much for this opportunity, for inviting me. And so as Paul explained, I will talk a bit about myself, about this academic career and the opportunity I had thanks to the MSCA fellowship, and also about this MCAA association from which Karen belongs and I belong as well, and all these networking opportunities, and I think the trans-sectoral possibilities it gives, which is very important and crucial for the future of research, I think. So, yeah, that's how it works. So yeah, as I said, first part will be on the input of the MSCA, and then I will talk about the French chapter of the Marie Curie Alumni Association. So, but first, I don't know if it will work. I hope. No. Okay. That's a bit sad, but so first, I propose to you to contemplate this beautiful muscle, which is all the beginning of my research project. So you have to imagine now, but this is the tongue of a muscle, and when it goes out, it leaves what is called a byssus, and what gives the possibility to the muscle to adhere to any adherence, any surface. And it makes one of the best glue nature created. And so this is how it looks. And yeah, people were amazed by this possibility, right? And they start to look up. And yeah, so this was published in Science in 2007, and that's where it started. They look up the protein into this byssus, so these things which the tongue of a muscle left. So I don't know if I do that. No, okay, sorry. I come back. So in this protein, you have lots of dopamine group, right? So the same than the neurotransmitter. But it's just a protein, so a tyrosine which was modified in a dopamine group. And actually what they found out, it's because of this dopamine, but not of its neurotransmitter action, right? It was on the foot, on the byssus of the muscle. They found out that this creates a material when you modify the pH. And actually in the sea, the pH is set. And when you modify the pH, you modify the material. And that's how the glue works. And what they found out in this lab, so Frank Caruso, which is one of the best researchers in nanomedicine, and they found out how to use this dopamine polymerization into polydopamine in order to make nanomedicine. And that's the lab where I went for my MSCA individual fellowship. And that's where...
Stay close to the microphone.
Oh, sorry. Yeah,
sure.
I will not... Sorry. And so that's where I went to learn about this polydopamine chemistry, right? Basically, how it works is that the dopamine polymerizes thanks to this catechol group, so I'm not going too deep into the chemistry, but all you need to know is that there is some iron ion involved, and this makes some polymers which is very pH dependent, and it looks like this dark hydrogel, and it has beautiful advantage for biological application and medical application because it's biocompatible, it's fully biodegradable, and it has antioxidant properties because it chelates the metal, right? So I was there in Australia learning about this chemistry, and then, thanks to this MSCA, I could go back in France, because that's the idea of the MSCA, right? It's to bring back the people after they learn some specific skills overseas. And I went to this institute in Normandy, the Blood and Brain Institute, and what they were doing, completely different discipline. They work in biology, and that's also the idea of the Marie Curie. It's to give the opportunity to help transdisciplinary research. And they were doing immuno-MRI, which is a technique they not fully invented, but they developed and contribute a lot, is using some nanoparticles, so iron oxide nanoparticles functionalized with antibody, which you see on the right. And on the top is, you have to imagine the patient is healthy. You don't see the immune reaction, right? If you use nanoparticles targeted towards biomarkers of inflammation, so the antigen expressed by the blood vessels, that's what you see after. So you see all these dark signal that can help radiologists to diagnose the inflammation signal. And what they were doing, since 2012, that's when they started, they were doing all this amazing application and showing on small animals, so it's all preclinical research until now, that it can be useful for all these diseases which are listed here. So it can be helpful to see the inflammation in the central nervous system. It can be helpful to see kidney lesion. It can be helpful to monitor multiple sclerosis, I forgot the name, so to monitor the different steps of multiple sclerosis and to monitor the action of immunotherapy. It can be useful for atherosclerosis, transient ischemic attack, and as you can see the inflammation in the brain, but as well in the heart, in the kidney, as I said, and more recently, they show great promises to diagnose the inflammation into Crohn's disease.
Yes, sorry. This is a 10-minute speech.
Yeah, it's almost done.
Okay, no problem. Okay, we got it right. No, fantastic.
I did not forget, sorry, I'm going there. And then, so the problem was that the particle iron oxide are not biodegradable, and that's where all this polydopamine chemistry and biodegradable materials came from. So that's the story. And since I came back in France, I worked on developing biodegradable iron oxide particles from this polydopamine chemistry, which I learned thanks to the MSCA fellowship. And that's where we are now. We filed the patent. The publication just was accepted recently. And now we want to move on to patient, right? Because that was the whole idea, is you have biodegradable contrast agent. All this approach I showed you, we can move to patient. And actually, that's where we validated. So you can see inflammation. You see inside the spinal cords for the experimental autoimmune multiple sclerosis in the gut, in the heart, in the kidney. I'm going fast, don't worry. And then, so thanks to this, that's where I went overseas to learn the chemistry, then apply it to medical research, right, to medical imaging, to see the immune reaction in MRI. We put a patent, and now the idea is to move to patient. So make a startup and validate all these clinical trials, do the toxicity test. And for this, you need to create a company, and you need to know more about the world of biotech industry, which as a researcher, I've been all my career into academic research. I'm still working in academic. I don't know about all this industry world, and that's the problem of transsectoral, the obstacle between different sectors, right? And that's what brings us, and I will be fast, I'm almost done, about the opportunity given by the Marie Curie Alumni Association. And what we did with the French chapter is to create these seminars, biotech seminars, which promote the networking between actors of industry and of academy. It was exactly my need, but it's also the need of many young researchers. And that's what we want to promote, to create this network, to make them understand what do you need to do if you want to move on clinical application. And in these seminars, we specifically invited some people working in the investment, so BPI France, which provides some specific funds. If you have a startups, they will help you, they will accompany, they will explain you what you need to do. So you need to do a GMP certification, you need to work with pharmaceutical industries, and you need to raise funds for that because clinical trials are very expensive, but actually many people are willing to give the funds, and these people are part of the Angel Santé, they are venture capitalists. They give money to this kind of, as long as you know how to speak to them, as long as you present your idea to them, and as long as you started your biotech, your startup, thanks to initial funds with the BPA funds. So that was the idea, and we also bring a lot of examples there. We had some example of a successful former Marie Curie alumni, Marie Curie fellow, which are part now of the Marie Curie Alumni Association. Mainly Murat Gunas, who is working now in the Bridging Science to Business workforce of the association, and who has some experience in creating startups, and he shared this experience. André Ho, as well, is a former Marie Curie fellow who has many experience in startups. And all the other, they started the startups and explained to us how it works. So that's the idea of this association, is to promote this network between different sectors, and in this case, sectors of industry, biotech industry, and academic research. So I'd like to thank everyone for your attention, to thank the actors of the French chapter who helped me to organize this event, and also to thank the Marie Curie Alumni Association, and to thank you for the invite. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Thomas. Okay, so we'll switch to a Q&A session. If you have any questions here in the audience, we have someone here with a microphone. Yes, fantastic. So all you need, you're here as well, fantastic. So all you need is raise your hand and you can ask any question you want. And you, over the internet, you can also ask your questions in the chat. Of course, Claire Morel, I would like to ask you a question on my behalf. Okay, you told us that there's so many things going on at the moment within the MSCA program. You told us about this plan for Ukraine, the code of conduct. You take into account sustainable impact priorities, widening fellowships, scientific diplomacy. There's so much going on, so many ideas. Now, are there new emerging questions, emerging issues that you would like to address as well that you haven't yet?
No, I think that during my short presentation, I really tried to address, let's say, the main strategic orientation on which we are working. Obviously, the issue of displaced researchers, the issue of academic freedom, which were mainly not high, let's say, on the not a high priority on the R&I agenda in the previous years, have become, I think, quite high now. And as I said, I mean, one of the first answers that we are providing is this specific fellowship scheme for displaced researchers from Ukraine. But more widely, I mean, all the let's say, the recent communication produced by the EU in the field of R&I, in the field of higher education, put a very strong emphasis on the issue of values, which maybe, again, a few years ago were not so high, and the issue of academic freedom. So I suppose that this will probably turn into more concrete actions in the coming years.
Thank you. Any questions in the audience for the members of our panel? Not yet, yes. Here you go.
Thank you. Thank you, Karen, for the wonderful presentation. I have a quick question about the behavioral competency. So including the behavioral competency in the research assessment. Number one, whether it's possible and how difficult it is. And the second would be to actually the other speaker, because basically this needs to be implemented by the institutions. And how are you actually willing to include behavioral competence in the research assessment? So, thank you.
Will you tell us, will you introduce yourself?
Sorry, sure. My name is Mostafa, I'm the former chair of MCAA.
Thanks very much.
I can start answering that. So, is it possible, I mean, I know there are already research institutions who include a competency element in their evaluation. For example, EMBL already does this. And just, I think it depends on the process. Because competency questions are often, in other sectors, are often included in interviews rather than featured in a CV. So I think there's a lot of discussion at the moment around the academic CV. There's this trialing of narrative CVs. I've been involved in that to some extent. I developed the Royal Society narrative CV that is now an inspiration for many. And I think it's a valuable route to explore, but the CV is not everything. There is a whole process, and it differs sometimes what is included. Sometimes there is an interview stage, sometimes there is not. So I think we need to really not just think about the different elements and try to think, can we change one element? I think it's more about looking at the entire process of recognition and evaluation. And I think, yes, if we look at that process, we need to think where would it be suitable to include, but I do think there would be an opportunity to include a competency element. But it's important to also, of course, continue, research quality should, of course, be continued to be evaluated as well, but I think we need to broaden out what we look at.
Karen, over the internet we have someone who asks you a short practical question, which is, as a researcher who wants to apply somewhere, how can you showcase your skills if not with your publications at the moment?
What is meant, because I initially had a very long CV for applying outside academia, and I was really not getting any interviews. And a colleague then from the Royal Society, where I had a placement, it was specifically for postdocs. So I did get in with the academic CV because they were used to it, because that was the audience for that position. But she said to me, "This is rubbish. This doesn't say anything to me."
So what should you do?
I mean, you have to think about there are so many things, so many competencies that you pick up as a researcher. You should talk to the people in the sector.
So you have to showcase them, right?
Yes, so talk to the people in the sector that you apply for about how they showcase it.
Okay.
I learned from people in the sector, they said to me, this is how it's done. And I had to think carefully. Because
what did you do then?
I had to go back and think about some of the things that I did as a researcher that I didn't think were valuable. Because they
what was that, for instance?
For example, there was a very difficult situation in my lab where actually someone had a smell. And
it happens.
It happens. No, it was very difficult.
Okay here.
It was people were talking about around her back, you know, and I said to the supervisor, I said someone should talk to her and resolve the situation, because people are leaving the office and our theoretical chemists are in the lab standing at the bench to avoid the office. And the PI said, "Yes, I agree. Yes, go ahead." So this person did not want to take responsibility. And this is an example I talked about, and this is how I got my first managerial role, by talking about how I approached this. But it didn't occur to me at the time that that was something of value, because the supervisor said, "You do it, it's not something important." You know, so you need to relearn what are experiences that are valuable elsewhere.
We have another question here.
Hi, hello, Patricia Gauthier from the Région Bretagne. I'm managing a COFUND project, and I'm actually interested in how MSCA is, and the MSCA program is actually in coherence with other European policies. And for example, today we already mentioned the European universities, and I was wondering, what are the links that you, Claire Morel, you are doing at your level between the European universities and MSCA? Thank you.
Who's your question for, Claire Morel?
Yes.
Okay, good.
Yes, I can. Yeah, I can start to answer that question, but there might be other colleagues who want to answer it as well. We already have a number of European universities who have applied successfully to the COFUND scheme, for example. I think we have 4 or 5 of them, and we might have, again, European universities who might be successful this year in the COFUND scheme. So I think it's a very concrete way of building on the successful experience of European university alliances and building on this experience to apply for other types of funding. We have as well developed a sort of fact sheet on synergies between MSCA and the Erasmus Plus program, so it goes beyond, of course, the European University Alliances, but giving a very concrete example on how synergies can be built between the 2 programs. It's on our website. Because you might know that under Horizon Europe, one of the priorities is synergies between programs. We talk a lot about it, but we hear as well from individuals and organizations who want to apply to the program that it's not always easy to see how it works in practice. So I would advise you to look at this, let's say, fact sheet that we have developed.
Maybe I can just add, for example, we applied as an institution, but for example, the same year that the first year of the COFUND PhDs, there was also a university in Paris who also was successful, Institut Pasteur. So what we built together, so these, because we were in the Parisian region, it was really to work together, to organize a common day, for example, for the PhDs, and to do events together. You know, there was once a year, and actually we are still continuing. But we can also think in doing that not only in the Parisian region. I would say also, for example, I've been on the advisory board of the COFUND of the University Aix-Marseille, for example. And this is what we try to do, is to share the good practices.
Graça, Raposo, COFUND is a fantastic instrument. You get 6 million euros, you can, over several years.
You get, the institutions also put
of
money,
course.
of course. And
it's
I have my deputy director that is here. So if I don't say that Institut Curie have put money on it,
of course,
no,
or
it's a COFUND.
Or other funding programs such as the.
So it's basically, it's the half and a half.
Okay.
And we need, of course, we need to pay the fellows over 3 years. And we also need to pay the events. In the beginning, we're doing the interviews on site before the pandemics.
Sure.
We were doing the interviews on site because we also thought that it was much better to do the interviews on site. Now, what we learn now from the pandemic is that it is possible to do it. So now it's more sustainable also, okay. I would say.
But so you get 6 million euros. You're able to hire tens of PhDs, so that's fantastic. What would you do to enhance the program, or to optimize it, or to improve it if needed?
What could we do to improve it?
What could the MSCA people that the European Commission could do?
We have a very good, I think what is good with the European Union is that we do have an officer with whom we work really closely. So we do have, when we have such a program, one thing, first, we need to have a good team behind. And I really want to thank the team behind that formed the training unit. We have a program manager. You really need to hire a program manager. And it's basically, I think it's the good relations that one can have with a European officer that can say, okay, you are allowed to do that, you can allow to do that. What it could be done better is that the European officers, now I need to say, is that in each country there are different policies and different politics. And it's true that we need to work, for example, with doctoral schools also, because the PhDs, they are not only at Institut Curie, but they are also, in doctoral schools. They need to register to the university, either PSL, either at the universities. And it's true that sometimes maybe the European officers are not really aware of the politics in each country. And I think that the officers could, they really need to take into account, when we need to change
the national realities.
Things. Yes, the national realities, because each country is really important. I'm really glad we got an audit. It was good, but sometimes it's maybe too strict, not taking into account the rules in each country.
We have a question here in the audience.
Thank you. I'm Fernanda Bajanca. I'm the chair of the Marie Curie Alumni Association. So I want to thank Karen and Thomas for their impressive testimony. But I have a question for Graça Raposo. So you showed how the MSCA programs were impacting so nicely the increase of international students. Now, it was very visible that in between the fundings, the numbers were dropping to the previous levels. So there doesn't seem to be an impact on changing the behaviors. So what is failing and how can that be improved? Is there really a huge difficulty in bringing foreign students?
I won't say that. It's not, I mean, it's true that, I mean, we can engage a number of fellows. It's true that the slopes can be a little bit like this. Because basically each year we have got around 600 candidates. So then there is a review board, there is a, you know, there's ranking of the candidates, and normally only 4 are interviewed at the end, you know, by the PIs and by a committee. And basically, I don't think it's really negative, this fellow, because it's really, during this period of time, we said, okay, we're going to engage 40 fellows. And I'm sure that now, after the 4 calls, we'll have these 40 fellows. I don't think that the drop is a real failure. I don't take it like that. We don't have problems in recruiting really great students, from not only from Europe, I mean from Asia, of course, not much from the US, for example, because of the levels of the diplomas, you know, because you really need to have a master, you know, there are a certain number of rules. But I don't think it's a problem to get really good students. We can talk about that later, but the drop is, I don't think it's a failure.
Thank you.
To finish, I'd like to ask a question to Thomas Bonnard. Do you have the feeling that the MSCA program could better prepare fellows to work with the industry or to?
Yeah, so that's an interesting question. So I think, yeah, they could provide maybe some more insight about, so there's always some events where all these MSCA fellows are gathered, and I would propose them to ask about their research and what do they want to do with their research, right? It's not just about publishing it. There's always a goal. So either it's to improve energy, either it's improve medical treatment, or it depends on the field. And I think to help them to focus on that and how it can be actually useful, that will be a way, and it's about trans-sector, right? It's about moving it. It can be moving your research to policy, it can be moving your research to industry. But I think like helping them to be aware of the impact their research can have can be a nice thing. Yes.
Okay, so I would like to tell you about 4 key moments that we're going to have now. So we are all invited to have lunch first, and it will start in a few minutes in the Green Cafe. Please stay here before I end my speech. Then at the end of our lunch, so that will be at 2:10, at 2:10, we will all attend one of 4 workshops. On your badge, your tag, you can see which of the 4 workshops you are going to attend. And so imagine that you will be in the lunchroom and there will be guides. Oh, I have it. Thanks very much. Everything's prepared. Merci, Eva. Eva, can we have a big round of applause for Eva and all the organizers? There are many. Eva is one of the key people who organized this event, and we have many people here and there. Okay, there are about 10 people taking care of us and whom we don't see. So at 2:10, we will attend one of 4 workshops. So you will be called in the lunchroom, okay? You will have guides. I guess they are here. Are they here? Could you move on here? One of them is here. Could you move here just to say hi? Just to say hi. Okay, here we go. So these are the people who will call you, okay, to take you to your workshops. Because, okay, workshop 4, dedicated to the Green Charter, will take place here in this very room. But the other ones won't even be in this building. Okay, so you will need direction. Okay, so if you are lost, you can rely on the leaflet, and you can see a map here. Eva, you wanted to say something?
Yes, so the people that are going to be on the workshop 1 on gender equality will follow Massy, who is here. So it will be at the Amphitheatre Marie Curie. For the workshop 2, it will be Aline, which is right here, and it will be at the Amphitheatre Hélène Martel. And the workshop 3, it will be Eugenia, which is right there, and it will be at the ESPCI. And finally, for the 4th workshop, it will be right here, so regarding Green Charter.
So they will call you at 2:10. And at the end of your... Thanks very much, guys, for this, for being here with us. Thanks very much. And at the end of your workshop, so at the end of your workshop, it will be 4 p.m. You will have a break. You will be invited to take a 30-minute break at the Green Cafe. So you will gather again at the Green Cafe. And at the end, we will be able to meet here for a 30-minute conclusion session, which will last 30 minutes. So if I, say things quite quickly. First Green Cafe to have lunch, then attend your workshop, then back at the Green Cafe for a break, and then we'll meet here again. Okay, I would like to thank very much with you, Claire Morel, Karen Stroobants, Graça Raposo, and Thomas Bonnard, please.